Approximately 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Many people want to improve their finances, but they simply don't know how. If it were me and I decided 2025 was the year I was going to get my finances in shape, this is exactly what I would do. The first thing on the list is take audit. You cannot get to where you want to go unless you understand where you are today. This means downloading all of your bank statements, your credit card statements, all of your investment account statements, every debt, every investment, every bank account, all of it. If you can, I highly encourage you to print it all out. I know it feels archaic, but trust me, it really does help. Take your bank statement and look through all of your transactions over the last 30 days. And then next to each transaction, I want you to physically write out a category that transaction aligns to. And so if you were grocery shopping, I want you to put groceries. If it is a auto payment, I want you to put debt. Basically go through all of your transactions over 30 days and figure out where your money is going. And this is a painful process. Many people, whenever they perform this process, they find that they're unhappy with some of their spending habits. And that's okay. It's not meant to be enjoyable. It's meant to show us the truth. So we need to find the reality of where our finances are. And that's the point of the categorization. It helps us to determine what categories that we are overspending on and potentially where we can make cuts.
And listen, there's no sugarcoating this. This part kind of sucks. It's going to take 1 to 2 hours, and it might be a little bit uncomfortable. But the good news is, on the other side of this, you will be much more confident because you know exactly where you stand financially. Once you're through this part, the rest becomes pretty structured.
I've created some free resources to be able to help you with this. Those should be coming out in another video shortly. So make sure that you hit subscribe, go check out those resources and a dedicated video on how to actually use those tools. The point of this is just to keep it very, very simple. We don't want to overcomplicate things. We don't want to make this more difficult than it needs to be or add additional friction that doesn't need to be there. All right, now once we have a benchmark and know where all of our expenses are going, then the second thing that I would do is create a budget. Now, when people think of budget, they think of like a super restrictive diet, and it sounds uncomfortable. It's like exercise. Whenever you first start exercising, your muscles feel sore, you feel tight, you need to stretch, and it's sometimes difficult to want to get out of bed and get into the habit of actually going to the gym. But I want you to switch your thinking a little bit. Instead of it being like exercise, something that the majority of people don't want to do, I want you to think of a budget as if it were a walled garden. Now close your eyes and think of the most beautiful garden that you can conceive. There are giant 20-foot walls around the garden. There are fountains flowing throughout with ponds and fish, all kinds of vegetation and small animals running throughout the garden. And you notice on one of the walls, there's a window. And so you start to approach the window. As you approach the window, you look outside and you notice that everything outside of the walled garden is just full of thorns and underbrush. There are dangerous creatures, and it looks like a very inhospitable place to be. That is essentially what we're creating with a budget. So outside of the budget is a dangerous path. It causes us to fall into traps that are not productive for us financially. And so that's exactly how a budget is. Once we have the budget in place and are comfortable with the boundaries that we've created, it's kind of amazing. It gives you full flexibility and freedom to do whatever you want with your money, as long as it's within the confines of the walled garden. And anytime that we take a step outside of that garden, we run the risk of falling into traps or getting back into debt or going back into old financial habits that aren't really conducive for us to reach our goals.
One quick point about the budget. It's meant to be restrictive, but not suffocating. What is suffocating is going years without paying attention and being financially exhausted. That's what we're trying to avoid.
Something that I do for my own budget is I will create a category specifically for myself to be able to spend on whatever it is that I want to spend money on. If I'm at the store and want to impulse purchase on something, then I can. It just comes out of that category that I select for myself and not have any regret doing so. It gives me the flexibility to be able to spend on the things that I want to without impacting my ability to reach my long-term goals. Now, number 3 on this list is set your goals. Now, I know that's a super cliche thing to say. Setting goals, great. Another goal setting video. But I want you to get really, really specific. See, within finance, there's a cognitive bias called mental accounting. It means that we associate the same amount of money differently depending on how we spend the money. So if we spend $100 on a speeding ticket, we assign the value of paying the speeding ticket differently than if we were spending $100 on a concert ticket. Which one feels better? Which one feels like we actually got our money's worth? The concert ticket, right? Well, I guess, if it's a good show. And it's the same thing with our goals. So the more specific that we are in naming the goals, the higher the likelihood that we will actually achieve those goals.
One of the powers of specificity is that it helps us to say no to thin desires, the things that are fleeting, the things that we don't really care about. For me, that would be like buying another pair of Jordans. And saying no to those things in lieu of putting money aside for the thick desires, the things that don't really change, that are durable, that year in and year out, I know that I want to allocate time, attention, and money to. For me, that would be things like traveling. I know that I want to do those things. And so if I have $100 to spend, do I really want the thin desire, the pair of Jordans, or do I want to allocate that money toward a thick desire, traveling? And sometimes the thin desire wins. But over the long term, I will allocate more time, attention, and money to the thick desires because I know that will produce more fulfillment long term.
All right, if you're just starting out, this is how I would structure your goals. Your first goal is to get 1 month's of expenses in the bank. So let's say that you spend $2,000 per month on non-discretionary expenses, meaning just the expenses that you need to keep the lights in the household running. Not talking about the concert tickets. What does it take to keep the lights on? Food, clothing, shelter, transportation, and minimums on any debt payments. Figure out what that number is and get 1 month in the bank, in savings, in a separate account, just in case of emergencies. Once you have this, you're going to feel so much more comfortable with your finances because you will no longer be living paycheck to paycheck. You'll have a little bit of money in the bank so that if your car breaks down, if the hot water heater goes out, then you have the money to pay for that. The second thing that I would do is pay off all high interest rate loans. If you're only paying minimum payments on your credit cards, the amounts of interest that you're paying and the length of time that it will require for you to pay off that loan is absolutely ridiculous. Once your high interest rate debt is paid off, then we can start looking at bulking up your emergency fund. We can start looking at allocating toward investments, other goals that you have, but we have to stop the bleeding. And that may take some time. We'll go more into detail in debt management in another video. The fourth thing to keep in mind whenever you are getting your finances under control is that you need to stop looking for shortcuts. If you want to build muscle in the gym, there's no shortcut for that. There's no pill that you can take in order to build the muscle. You have to do the reps. You have to lift the weights. You have to get into the gym and start exercising. And it's the same with finance. There is no shortcut. There are people who are speculating on meme coins, meme stocks, purchasing lottery tickets, all of these things hoping to shortcut the process. The reality is, even whenever people do receive huge sums of money, the likelihood of losing it is extraordinarily high because those people don't have a solid foundation for how to actually manage their money. They don't have systems in place to keep them within the walled garden. They don't have the structure of long-term goals. They don't know where they're going. They don't know where they are today. You have to start small and you have to start where you are. It's okay to take small steps to reach your goals. You're building your foundation so that over time, as you accumulate more wealth, then you actually have these systems in place to be able to keep it. And just as a bonus, number 5 is to just start. There's a cognitive tendency for us to be avoidant when something is very difficult. If I look in the mirror and I don't like the way that I look, I will tend to avoid looking in the mirror. If I know that I look at my bank account and I'm not going to like what I see, I tend to avoid looking at my bank account. I'm not a therapist. However, there's principles within cognitive behavioral therapy that apply to personal finance. One of those principles is that the more that we are exposed to something that we're afraid of, the less afraid over time that we will become. This occurred to me after I had completely gone broke, lost it all, and had to start over. I was so scared to look at my bank account because I knew that the amount there was not sufficient to be able to cover my bills. And then one day, I kind of had this epiphany that me not looking at it doesn't change the number. Me avoiding my bank account does not fundamentally change my financial position. And so would it be better for me to avoid it, to not know, and to just hope that whenever I swipe my card, it goes through? Or is it better for me to face it, acknowledge where I am, be okay with that, and decide to grow and do something different? Which one do you think will produce the better result? For me, it was facing it. Me acknowledging that the number does not change based on me avoiding it was actually a breakthrough that I needed in order for me to actually say, you know what, let's figure this thing out.
I think many people just kind of wait for the right time to start working on this stuff because they know that it's going to require a little bit of time and effort, and sometimes they just don't know where to start. Now, you could start this today, or you can wait until next year. The difference is, next year you'll be 1 year older, and you still would not have started. And so would you rather start today, rip off the proverbial Band-Aid, and wake up a year from now being 1 year older and 1 year further along in this journey? Or would you like to be at the same place that you are today a year from now? If that makes sense. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or need some support throughout this process, feel free to send me a note. There's a link in the description on how to get a hold of me. Send me a DM on multiple platforms or shoot me an email. I would love to hear from you and be able to help you in any way that I can.
Everything that you want financially is on the other side of fear. and it's on the other side of just a little bit of work. So I just want to encourage you that if you are in this position, that you are struggling, you know that you need to change the way that you are managing your money and you want to do so, then you just have to start. Don't place judgment on your past mistakes. Nobody cares about that. What we care about is what are you doing today in order to improve tomorrow? And with that, I'll leave you for this week. Hope you all have a great week.